I recreated the iconic LINGS cars website from 2021 in my Nordcraft coloring book submission, and I want to show you. Here it is in all its glory. It is an advert for Andreas's cars and takes all the inspiration from LINGS cars from 2021. We have some fun cars that animate on hover. We've got Andreas's funny head. And we've got some really fun things that also make use of some quite vintage CSS techniques. We've even got a video on this version of the coloring book where Andreas speaks to us.
Hi, I'm Andreas, and you can trust me. Click the button below to open your version of the Nordcraft coloring book. You can trust me.
If you want to create your own version of the Nordcraft coloring book, you can go to nordcraft.com/coloring-book and click the Start Coloring button. Here you will see the template for the Nordcraft coloring book. We've got all sorts of things for you to play with, including images, headings, text, and buttons. You'll notice that on my version, as well as editing the CSS, I moved a bit of the HTML around. So the canvas is yours to experiment with. So let's go into the Nordcraft editor and I'll show you some of the things I played with. But before that, I want to give a huge shout out to the Wayback Machine, because without that, this would not have been possible for me to recreate. And I would encourage you to explore the Wayback Machine and have a look at some old websites to discover some vintage CSS techniques, how we used to do it and how we basically used to hack everything. Here we are in the Nordcraft editor, and I'm going to go through a few of the fun things that I built. So the first thing is this animated repeating gradient background behind Andreas's head. Now, to create this, you need to create a container that kind of overflows where you want to view it. And we're going to animate it with background position. So first off, the repeating linear gradient uses hard stops, which is where you duplicate the color you want in the stripe and you put that at the same pixel value or percentage value as the next color. At the time of recording, the Nordcraft animation editor doesn't yet support animating background position, but you can hack it. I have a style tag here where I define a custom keyframe animation called Move Stripes that animates the background position, which makes the stripes move across the screen. So that the stripes are diagonal rather than horizontal, I'm just using a rotate transform at -45 degrees. And talking of animating background position, that is also used for the lights that blink on and off. Now this uses a little bit of a vintage CSS technique where we're using an image that is a sprite image. Now this image contains both the dim and lit version of the light. Here it is in the media tab, a very low fidelity image that contains the lit light and the dim light. Now this is set as a background image on this span, and the initial offset position on the x-axis is 0%. The width and height of the span are both 32 pixels, which is the width and height of one of the lights. And again, there's another custom keyframe animation here in the style tag, which animates the background position X of that element, which is what makes it look like the light is flashing on and off. The animation is added to the CSS panel, referencing the name of the animation I defined in the style tag with 1 second, and it runs infinitely with a timing of 0.3 seconds. It also uses this steps function, which I want to talk about. Now, the steps function in CSS defines a transition that divides the input time into a specified number of intervals that are equal in length. What this actually means is that if you define steps on your animation, instead of the animation states transitioning smoothly from one to the next, these steps will make the animation jump from one state to the other, which can create some cool and janky animation effects. Next, I want to show you a cool technique I learned to be able to reflect things. So here is an image of Andreas, and he is reflected. And this is using the WebKit box reflect property with a value of below. We now have support for all of the keywords for most of the CSS properties in the style panel in Nordcraft, so you can actually see what's possible by going through the drop-down list and finding the one that's right for you. Just a word of caution though, WebKit Box Reflect is not supported in Firefox, so it's not baseline, but I thought it was a fun thing to add in regardless. Next, I want to talk about this flashing Piccadilly sign here. Now, at first glance, you might think it's a GIF, but it's actually flashing using an animation. On this element, I am animating the filter property. The filter property allows you to apply different effects via CSS, such as grayscale or sepia, or increase the contrast or brightness. I'm using an initial brightness of 0.5 on this sign, that I'm animating the filter infinitely to flash on and off. Now, again, filter is not available to animate in the beta Nordcraft editor just yet, so I defined a custom keyframe here called postlight in my style tag. And I added that animation in the CSS panel manually. Again, I'm using the steps function to make it look like it's turning on and off rather than fading between the two different states. Next, another CSS technique I want to show you is about layering box shadows to create kind of a gradient box shadow. On these gray boxes here, you'll see I have 3 box shadows. The first one is a lighter green, the second one is more of a mid green, and the third one is a darker green. And it kind of creates a gradient effect that looks pretty cool. Next, on animating Andreas's thumb here, his body and thumb are separate images, and the thumb is using a rotate transform animation, and it's using the steps function again to make sure that transitioning between those two animation states is not smooth. And I used the same technique on Andreas's head at the bottom here. It's just rotating, and we're using the steps function. Next, I want to talk about the video at the top of the page. This is an HTML video element that is placed behind this image with a cutout. And it's getting a video source from a CMS, and it uses a separate image as a poster. I've got to use this cross-origin anonymous attribute because I'm actually loading a VTT file from a CMS as well to show the subtitles. This is the VTT file. If you are curious, it has the timestamps for where the subtitles fall in the video, and the line 20% property instructs the browser to put the subtitles from 20% at the top of the video container. Now, I didn't want to show the controls on this video because it kind of would have ruined the effect. So there is an extra button to play the video and an extra button to stop the video. And to do that, we're using the web media package available in Nordcraft. This is the web media package. It gives you a variety of actions to play media, pause media, load media, set the current time of a media element, and play audio as well. So on this button, I've got an event that uses the play media action from that package, and the ID of that video is trust. I also set a video playing variable to true so I can show and hide the play and stop button. And then after the length of the video, which is 12 seconds, I set video playing back to false. I use the same kind of functionality on the stop button, which uses the pause media action on that video and also sets the video playing back to false. So that when you trigger that, you can play and pause it. Nice. Next, I wanted to show you some fun focus visible styles that I added to some of the interactive links on the page. There's this one, join Discord. The focus visible style variant just gives it a fun green background and a red border, pretty garish. And then further down, we have the links for inspiration, Nordcraft for designers, etc. On this one, the focus visible uses kind of a cool dashed outline effect. Again, you can find all of the keywords for all of these types of effects in the drop down, so you can see what's available for you from CSS right there without needing to Google anything or look anything up. I decided to change the color as you tab through these links here. So we've got different garish colors available for you to tab through. And down here as well, we've got one on the click for intro course. You can also animate elements when they are visibly focused. So the focus visible styles for the menu links use a bouncing animation created with the animation editor. I just added a little transform translate on the Y-axis, and the animation runs infinitely. We've also got a fun animation on hover of each of the cars, which uses the same kind of technique. And each time you step through the animation, the bounce gets a little bit lower, so it looks like it's falling from the sky and bouncing on the floor. Physics and stuff. And again, this goes infinitely because why not? And finally, I want to talk about how I styled the title for this page. Now, this logo on the LINGS Cars website is actually an image because it's actually pretty tough to create some text with a gradient background and add a shadow to it as well. But you can do it. So this text is an H1 and it has a background of a linear gradient. And to use a gradient as a background for a text, you also need to use these advanced properties: background clip text, WebKit background clip text, and WebKit text fill color transparent. Now, because this is using background clip, if you added a shadow to this text element, it wouldn't actually show because the background has been clipped. So for this, you can duplicate this element and make sure it's not an H1 and use a span because you don't want duplicate H1s on a page. And if you duplicate the text, duplicate the font and the font size and make this color black, you can position it absolutely and change the left and top to your desired shadow style, and that will create that effect. Quick heads up though, you want to make sure that for screen readers, the user experience is optimized and you don't want the screen reader to read out that duplicated text. So you can add an ARIA hidden true attribute to the duplicated text acting as the shadow to prevent that. So that's a quick overview of some of the fun things I built into my Nordcraft coloring book submission. You can take a look at my coloring book submission on nordcraft.com/coloring-book. The link is in the description. And if you make your own, don't forget to submit it to our wall of fame so we can show the world as well. Get started by clicking Start Coloring and have fun.